The off-season flew by, didn't it? And there's enough to speak about, with the first serious F1 2024 track running taking place in Bahrain this week. We'll fill you in on the things you can keep an eye out for during these 3 days. Pre-season testing will take place in Sakhir for 3 full days from Wednesday to Friday, the 23rd of February. And it will provide us with the first opportunity to observe the new cars running together on the track before the season's opening round at the same circuit the following week. The big question about testing is, will pre-season testing provide a clear picture of the order? Pre-season testing will reveal where the field stands ahead of the 2024 Formula One season. However, it will not provide a clear image. Fuel loads and engine modes remain mostly unknown. Top teams are also renowned for sandbagging, which involves going slower than they can. We'll have to wait until qualifying and the Bahrain Grand Prix to obtain a more accurate indication, but we can make an informed prediction based on testing results. You can also expect some chaos in the pits whilst watching the testing, as many enthusiastic photographers will attempt to shoot the new cars on track. But once they return to the garages, the teams will keep every conceivable secret. As a result, teams frequently place barriers in front of their new cars between runs to make setup modifications and other alterations. If there is a standstill on the track, cars are typically totally covered to prevent prying eyes from capturing images and subsequently reporting back to their employers. And probably the most important word of the week will be sandbagging. If you're new to Formula One and haven't heard it before, you're going to hear it a lot this week. Sandbagging is the act of intentionally running cars in less powerful engine settings or not pushing for the duration of a complete lap in order to conceal their real capabilities during pre-season testing. It's important not to focus just on the daily leaderboards. Another important clue of improvement could be the total laps driven, as the amount of time the teams can spend driving around Bahrain will be vital this week. With so little time for testing, every second spent on the track is crucial. A high lap count at the conclusion of each day, while not indicative of overall speed, is a solid early indicator of reliability and that a team's car is at least robust. Simply put, more laps equals more data for the teams to utilize to determine their next moves, ideally leading to improved performance in the future. And although a team could drive hundreds of laps each day, do not anticipate the drivers to throw the game away too much. Despite the fact that pre-season testing does not provide much in terms of pure lap time, we can typically determine who has struck the ground running and who is suffering as the season begins. So, now you're up to speed with the general feeling of testing. What else can we expect, and what are some of the other big things to look out for these upcoming days? Well, first up, what is McLaren hiding after all that fuzz around their car launch? One of the most enjoyable aspects of testing is filling in the gaps between what teams demonstrated during their launches and what is genuine, and no team has more blanks to fill in than McLaren. It has been purposefully secretive, with a determined attempt to limit the amount of photographs and conceal aspects of the car at launch. The revised side impact structure, wing and side pod arrangements, front suspension, center area of the underfloor, and floor edges are all covered in some fashion. As Lando Norris put out, "Why give up more than you need to?" We have a nagging sense McLaren may not have been hiding much. McLaren has previously used Photoshop to hide barge boards and floorboarders. When it's disclosed, it's a floor edge or a barge board arrangement. Not nothing, not simple, but very much what you'd anticipate. We could be mistaken, but that is why we want to find out. Has McLaren been misdirecting us on something minor? Is it a diversion method designed to divert attention away from another aspect of the car that it is particularly proud of? Or will there truly be a wow factor when the car is seen properly for the first time? The essential issue is, what has McLaren gone to such lengths to conceal? Has Mercedes finally gotten it right this time? Following what Toto Wolff described as a complete overhaul of its car for 2024, there will undoubtedly be a lot of attention focused on the Mercedes W15 and whether it is genuinely any good. Mercedes' new pull rod front, push rod rear suspension system will be a first-order test item. But with the more apparent aero surface alterations, including the unusual-looking front wing, there may also be doubts concerning its legality. It's an extreme design that looks to have deleted a large portion of the interior of the final flap in order to direct cleaner airflow to the front of the chassis. According to F1 rules, front wing parts must be between 5 and 15 m apart when they come together at their closest position, and the rearmost section of each element, with the exception of the furthest back, must not be visible from above. This practically implies that different sections of a front wing should resemble a set of stairs leading down, with the steps overlapping when viewed from above. Mercedes looks to have followed the rules by attaching the shortened fourth front wing element to the nose with a little piece of bodywork or wire. This corresponds to the profile of the third element's trailing edge, so satisfying the criteria. So, do rival teams believe it is legal, and will the FIA consider changing the laws to prevent this design from being utilized in the future? More importantly, does it truly work? Is Red Bull for real with their extensive upgrade list? As the last one on the list, the Red Bull RB20 was presented, and there was enormous shock. A car touted as a development of the all-conquering 2023 car was dramatically different. The issue arose: will it keep its appearance during testing? Details like the floor edge and diffuser, which were blanked out during the presentation, will certainly change from the launch car. However, considering the apparent astonishment at the move to side pod inlets and shoulder cannons, which are similar to what Mercedes had last year and have since been dropped, it's only logical to wonder if Red Bull is serious. With what team chief Christian Horner described as a non-conservative development, the team insists that the launch car was basically the same as it would be in Bahrain. This begs the issue of whether Red Bull has changed the game yet again, and if so, how much of a knock will competitors' aspirations suffer? Testing will begin to provide the answers. Has Ferrari missed out again with neglecting their development? It's impossible to feel completely secure in Ferrari. Pre-season testing will give us the first indication of whether that lack of trust is unfounded or reasonable. The team discusses prioritizing driver feedback and placing Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz at the forefront of making this car less cruel to drive, following last year's issues with peakiness and instability. However, there appears to be a conservative aspect within that evolutionary trajectory. This car isn't especially cutting edge. Looking at the SF24 from a glass half-full viewpoint, let's suppose Ferrari's mechanical platform, which is fundamentally different in that it retains pull rod rear suspension while others have switched to push rod, is not the incorrect decision. If Ferrari has improved its low-speed strengths, basically strong traction and ride quality, with better and more stable aerodynamics in the back, what's stopping the team from adding appropriate race pace to its clear qualification prowess? That is the goal. Although pushrod rear suspension is currently preferred by all of Ferrari's competitors, owing to the aerodynamic advantages. Soon, we'll find out if Ferrari is missing a trick. Is Aston Martin back like last year? The Aston Martin AMR24 definitely looks the part, but only when it's pitted against the competition will it be clear whether or not the Silverstone-based team can recreate its early season form from 2023. Technical director Dan Fallows has made it obvious that the Green team's objectives are high, claiming that Red Bull is beatable and that Aston Martin is pursuing. The issue is that Aston Martin felt confident in its ability to bridge the gap to Red Bull last season, but after a strong start with 6 podium results for Fernando Alonso in the first 8 races, its form dipped. The question is if it truly grasped why the enhancements over the season did not always function as expected. Fallows is certain that the squad has learned from the experience, and that the late season revival will be reflected in the new AMR24. It's a car with a lot of apparent modifications, and he's certain that, based on the simulation techniques used to create it, the new style will produce results. Testing, and if the car performs as predicted, will reveal whether Aston Martin will be back on track or relegated to marking time, trundling around with Alpine in the middle of the field. And lastly, what can we expect from the Red Bull clone? What has been termed as 2024's most controversial F1 car will receive a lot more attention in Bahrain. The first car constructed under the relaunched RB team name has a striking similarity to Red Bull's all-conquering RB19, and it represents the closest collaboration between Red Bull's 2 F1 teams in well over a decade. The RB19's pull rod front suspension, as well as the gearbox and pushrod rear suspension, have been carried over to the unfortunately called VCARB 01. This should open further performance possibilities for RB, which, in its AlphaTauri version, has already made tremendous progress with a series of improvements in the second half of 2023. If it can extract the potential improvements of using Red Bull suspension in terms of platform control and aerodynamic consistency, the team might make a huge stride forward. However, If what some view as a Red Bull clone performs well in testing, it is guaranteed to attract the attention of its rivals, particularly McLaren manager Zak Brown, who has often stated his displeasure with Red Bull owning two teams and has called on the FIA to interfere. The quicker car, the more the debate. That is why RB's testing pace will be keenly monitored. What are you going to look out for during the testing days? And what are your expectations? Let us know in the comments down below.